Welcome back to the Daily Rundown with me, Joe Thomas Ashcroft, very scruffily standing in for Dan Morfitt. I'm joined by our sports reporter, Elle Rudd, and we're going to be chatting all things sports. Now, firstly, we're going to be talking about Jose Mourinho. First of all, Elle, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
No, it's fine.
Jose Mourinho, the special one, has landed in Manchester.
Potentially.
Potentially. Is it still not done?
Potentially. Manchester United are still to make the announcement. They have to make the announcement through the New York Stock Exchange and can only do so when the contract is signed, but United have not made any statements. They're expected to make one tomorrow at around 1 p.m. in time for the Stock Exchange. But again, they said that on Monday, and here we are on Thursday.
I find it fascinating that these days a managerial change has to be announced on the stock exchange. It is a far cry from where football once was, I think.
Football is no longer what it used to be.
It's not, but I mean, in terms of the anticipation around this, because this has been one of the longest running, most predictable sagas, I think,
Yes.
and we got a very predictable conclusion. He's been widely touted for the job since around January time when... You know, Van Gaal was struggling, and I think on top of that, basically, he's wanted the job since Ferguson.
Since he got sacked.
He was batting his eyelashes at him when he was Real Madrid manager, when they lost that Champions League quarter-final. I think it was like, oh, the better team. We won. You are the, you know.
Yeah.
What are United fans making of this so far?
Everyone I've spoken to so far personally is welcoming of Mourinho, but also online they ran a study when it was announced because it was initially announced after United won the FA Cup on Saturday, but 53% of United fans are apparently not happy about Mourinho's apparent appointment.
Now, why is that?
A lot of people say, well, he's good in a sticky situation, he leaves a mess in his path, you know, he leaves destruction in his pathway. And people are worried that, you know, he might come and stay for 2 years, but after that he'll leave and structurally the club will be in tatters.
Well, I mean, because this has been interesting in the sort of clubs that he's gone to. Now, obviously, we'll sort of take Porto out of the equation. You know, a very, very large European club, but one that was always going to, you know, it was punching above his weight.
Oh, gotcha.
The two occasions where he's left Chelsea, that has been... catastrophic, I think, at the moment.
Yeah.
But, I mean, do you see this? He's often talked about the idea of a long-term project. Is this finally the one that he might take on?
I like the idea that he's going to stick there for a long time and build it up from losing the Champions League silverware and actually having a very disappointing season for a top four club and build it up to be one of, you know, back to what everyone assumes Manchester United is, which is one of the biggest clubs in the world. Also, I like the idea that he's doing it to follow Pep Guardiola. You know, because if it is announced tomorrow that he is taking over next season, the battle of the two Manchester managers is going to be a really interesting one, and I think it's going to be a really fun one to watch from both a fan's perspective and an analytical journalistic perspective.
What's it going to mean for some of United's younger starlets coming through? Because he doesn't have a great track record.
He doesn't like the younger fans, which is unfortunate for promising players like Martial. Not Martial, Rashford, sorry. And people have already said, you know, Mata needs to start looking for a new job as it is. Because I think potentially it'll be a bad decision for the younger players of United, but as a managerial point of view, if it's going to help United, then that's Mourinho doing his job. But it's, you know, the proof is in the pudding. It depends how it turns out in the end.
Well, they've still not announced him, but
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that's a done deal. Now, secondly, it's MotoGP and bodyguards, I believe. Now, this, I have to admit, is an area I'm not particularly expert in. So what have you got for us?
Okay, so I'm going to give you a bit of brief background as a non-fan of the sport. So there are three big names in the sport. There is the old GOAT, Valentino Rossi. He has got something like, it's 9 Grand Prix championships to his name. He is a legend.
Is he now starting to be called the old GOAT? Because I'm old enough to sort of, despite my boyish looks, I'm old enough to sort of remember him sort of taking over from the likes of Fogarty and things like that. Now he's the old GOAT.
He's now the old GOAT when...
that makes me feel very sad.
3 years ago, Marc Marquez won his first world champion aged 21. So
Makes me feel ill.
yeah, so he's the old goat. But then you also have Marc Marquez, who, like I said, won his first championship and now has 2 championships to his name and is broken pretty much all the world records and is pegged to be the next Rossi. And then you have Jorge Lorenzo, who won last year and has 3 world championships to his name. And, you know, there is a lot of drama surrounding these people. So last season, end of the season, really dramatic. Rossi had accused Marc Marquez of conspiring with Jorge Lorenzo against him so the 2 Spaniards could take a lead and Lorenzo could take the championship title. And then it got to I think it was the Qatar edition, but don't quote me on that, it might be the Malaysian Grand Prix. Rossi and Marquez were battling it out, both taking the apex on the corner, and Rossi kicks Marquez off his bike when they're battling out. Because when you're battling it out, you get very close. You come within inches and you occasionally you touch, and that's what Rossi passed it off as. But if you rewatch that video, there is a definite kick. He flings his leg out, pushes him off, and Marquez crashes out.
What was the consequence of that?
He was docked 12 points, putting him down seriously in the league table, meaning Lorenzo took the world championship. Now, as Rossi is a legend of the sport, probably the biggest name racing at the moment, you know, everybody, even if you're not a MotoGP fan, you know Valentino Rossi, and he has so many fans, and the fans went ballistic. They took to Twitter, there was petitions, there was serious abuse online towards Lorenzo and Marquez because of Rossi's actions and his eventual punishment, which, you know, it was deserved and frankly I think very lenient, because what he could have done could have cost Marquez his life, because that is what you're dealing with when you're racing motorbikes. You are dealing with actually losing your life if you crash wrong. And this last weekend was the Mugello Grand Prix, which is in Italy, the Italian Grand Prix, Rossi's home turf. Everyone's a Rossi fan. So you have these 2 Spaniards who are outsiders, hated by Rossi fans for what happened last season, and then but since last season, tensions have risen, and there was such a credible threat to the 2 riders' health, they were issued with bodyguards. The first time that's ever happened in the sport. Normally in MotoGP, they walk around the paddock freely and happily, mobbed by fans, but never at risk. Because it's something that we're not used to. You see footballers, they've got their bodyguards, they have a wide berth from them and their fans, because, you know, people do get quite upset about football. But this is a genuinely new phenomenon for MotoGP. And it's really scary as an avid supporter to see my favourite sport drop to such a level where the riders are in trouble. And at the Mugello Grand Prix, Rossi unfortunately had his engine explode, had to leave the race for technical reasons, and Lorenzo took the win. Mugello fans weren't happy and booed him as he took the podium, as his national anthem played.
Well, I think from something quite dark to something a lot more light, I think, and a bit more something to be proud of, I think, because you've been speaking to the first of a kind, I believe, recently. Yes,
in South Africa, the first competitive African rugby team comprised of LGBT plus inclusive players has hit the world with a global campaign of posters of their actual players posing in gay stereotypes and insults. So they have such pictures as these giant rugby players holding pansies.
I think we've got some here that we can actually look at. Yeah.
So these are actually, I spoke to them and they said it's really important that they actually use the players. So they're dressed as the pansy, the queen, the pillow biter, all sorts to combat this derogatory terms around rugby, reclaim it, make it their own, and find humour in it. And it is gone. Last week it went global. For everyone has, you know, I spoke to the leaders of the Josie Cats, which is the team involved, and they said that the reception they received is beyond wonderful. They haven't received any negative comments, and for a country such as South Africa, which unfortunately, whilst it adores its rugby, you know, if you're South African, rugby isn't just a sport, it's a way of life. But hate crimes are unfortunately still up there as well. It's a very common thing for the LGBT community to deal with. So to not only take a stance, but take such a bold stance, it's really impressive, I think.
I mean, did they expect this kind of reception? And I suppose critically, do you think this is going to make a difference in South Africa?
I think it is. I think from the way that they're showing these negative stereotypes. When I spoke to Chris, who is one of the players and the guy behind the PR team that created these, when he posed the idea of advertising for the team for recruitment to his firm, and they showed him some pictures, and the comment was, they don't look gay. And they ran with that idea because if you are, homophobes take this view that gay people look and act and speak a certain way. So to take that idea and then stick it on some massive, terrifying, built like brick outhouses rugby players dressed as fairies and queens, it's really powerful, and it shows that they're not stereotypes and they are not the derogatory terms that we impose on them.
Well, thank you very much for that, Elle. That was, very jealous that you actually got to, speak to these guys in
They
an
were
interview.
wonderful. They were so wonderful.
Wonderful stuff. Well, that sadly is all we have time for the sports report, but thank you very much, Elle. Join me again in a few minutes when I'll be joined by Zia Chowdhury and Loz Kay. See you in 3. Bye-bye.